In the previous video, we saw how RSpec can display the red, green, and blue channels separately to help you detect if you've overexposed your images. This works in Spectra videos too. First, let's open the 3D histogram. And now with the Control key and the left mouse button held down, I'll bracket in just the spectrum. Now there's our total profile of all colors. As I click on the 3 color channels in the panel here, you can see that they're overexposed too, just like in the previous example. So let's close this image. I want to show you one final thing here. To set this up, I'm going to select the entire image with Control left mouse button. And here we can see the video is running, at about 14 frames per second. Frankly, this is an unrealistic example. Since spectra are so dim to start with, this frame rate is too fast to actually capture a spectrum. But this fast frame rate lets me show you something important if you're doing video spectroscopy. Now watch what happens to the frame rate when I pop up the pixel map. The speed drops to here, about 4.75 frames per second. Now watch what happens if I enlarge the sampling region by dragging the orange lines apart. Now the frame rate has dropped down to, about 3 frames per second. What we're seeing here is that the pixel map is really expensive in terms of computer resources. Your computer may get sluggish if it's so busy. So the first thing to do is snug down the orange lines as close to the spectrum as you can. You'll need good tracking to do that. Now that raised the frame rate up to 5 again. The computer isn't as busy processing all those pixels. Since we don't need the zero order, let's bracket in just the spectrum and watch what that does to the frame rate. Now it's jumped up to about 9 frames per second. Now, my computer's a fast computer. Yours may not be. So when you're reviewing the 3D histogram or just looking at video spectra in general, bracket things in if you can. Now, these 2 fields are new. This field allows us to limit how often the 3D histogram is updated. Let's change it from as fast as possible to once a second. You can see our frame rate jumped up to almost 15 frames a second. The 3D histogram is only updating once a second, but that's plenty. Okay, now let's drag the orange lines apart and bracket that region in. And we can see that our frame rate dropped to, about 11 frames per second. So over here, there's one other way we can limit the resources that the histogram is using. Right now, the 3D histogram is plotting all of the data between the orange lines. Let's change that to just 20 lines, which is the default. So now, even if the orange lines are really far apart, only these top 20 lines will be included in the 3D histogram. If your computer is a bit older and slower, and hey, aren't we all? This will protect you in case you've spread the orange lines out really far and it's slowing down your machine. Experiment a bit with this field. If your computer doesn't really get sluggish when you spread the orange lines out really far while you're playing a video, you can increase the value here. There is one possible drawback with this field. I'm going to move the orange line up a bit. Notice that the 3D histogram here shows only a part of the spectrum, even though it's between the orange lines. That's unexpected. And that's because the spectrum data in the video frame is mostly more than 20 lines below here. So if the histogram isn't showing your data, snug the orange lines down really tight against your data in the spectrum in the frame. So in this video, we've seen that you can break out the red, green, and blue channels in the 3D histogram on video spectra too. And that there are 2 new fields that, if you need them, can help keep your computer running quickly in spite of the high resource demands that the 3D spectrogram might make.